everyone. So, my name's Chanel, and I am deciding to start a podcast. This is. I'm. A, let me start over. So, I'm a current college senior at a little tiny school called Harvey Mudd College, and this year is going to be a really transitional year for me with, graduating, uh, going into the real world. We'll see. And I also happen to be a knitter. I was inspired to start a podcast by watching a bunch of knitting podcasts and just enjoying it. Felt like having someone to chat with while I was knitting. And so I'm in a series of videos, I'm going to talk about some knitting related things, and then also just kind of have a video log of my life and the changes that will occur this year. So, as I mentioned before, I'm a college senior. I'm a physics major, and I am very passionate about the sciences. But lately, I've been feeling pretty burnt out from school. I put off grad school apps for a year, and I've decided to take a gap year to work in education or public service, because also over the past year I've discovered a different passion for community organizing and really like tuning into the people around me, seeing what their needs are, seeing what my needs are, and helping everyone work together to make a better future. So that's where I am with my career now. Um, it's kind of scary, honestly. I'm really scared of what's going to happen after graduation. So yeah, that's me. Knitting wise, I'm a pretty new knitter. I've only been knitting for about a year, and yeah, I from the start I was a very ambitious beginner. I always challenged myself to take on new projects, different kinds of projects with different techniques, not just I want to try this project for this technique. No, I would pick up multiple techniques within a project. Like my first pair of socks, that was my third project overall, and it was a lace pair with a Dutch heel, all sorts of. I'd never done a heel turn before, and that was all sorts of things. If you're watching this video, well, first of all, thanks. But if you're watching this video and you're not a knitter, maybe me babbling about knitting will inspire you to knit. So, um, uh, so yeah, I like to take on challenging projects, and I hopefully I'll have a wide variety of projects to show off. And I've also trying to tie in knitting to the rest of my life. I've always loved crafts and creativity, and since when I started moving towards the sciences in middle school, joining the robotics team, I've always kept kind of making things and really using my creativity. I've I've always tried to incorporate it into my work in the sciences. So I think maybe part of my burnout with physics is that I've just spent so much time in class, like learning a bunch of information, and I didn't feel like I got the chance to kind of keep making things with my hands, which I could get from research. Over the last summer, this past summer, I was in Houston at Rice University doing research, and um, I was in an optics lab and setting up kind of the series of lenses and mirrors for a laser to pass through to get to the right place in the experiment. And I really liked that because I could learn the physics behind what was going on, what the experiment was looking into. It was really hard physics. I can't explain it right now. But I was also making something. So, maybe a year off from physics, apply for so that was experimental work, very experimental. I'm So then I can kind of refocus my efforts on being an experimental physicist. Or, you know what, maybe I'll just quit and become an artist. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, all right, on to knitting stuff. So, first thing is I'm working on a shawl. This shawl I've been posting updates in a knit along in one of the podcasts I listen to, Andre Sue Knits. So she's having a shawl along, which has been a lot of fun. This is my first time participating in like a knit along type thing, so it's been fun. I was like, wow, I have people to talk to about knitting. I have a lot of friends who are curious about my knitting. I've taught a couple of them to knit, and some of them also crochet and stuff. We actually we kind of have a small cohort of people. We all bring our projects to a physics colloquium, which is a once a week thing where they bring in a speaker um, to give a research talk, and you just kind of sit there and listen. So I started bringing my knitting, and then one of my friends brought her crocheting, and then over winter break I taught another one of my friends to knit, and then yesterday, this our latest talk was yesterday. Yesterday there were just three of us in a row, and we were all like doing our thing. It was great. It was great. Anyway, so this pattern, this is the Chiral pattern by Leila. I don't know how to say her last name. Sorry, Raabe, Leila Raabe. And here it is. This is what I have so far. It's going to be an elongated triangular shawl. And I really like the textures. It's why I chose it. The yarn is creme brulee. I don't have the label on me. The yarn is creme brulee, DK weight, 100% merino superwash, and the colorway is cocoa. So it's this nice, like, kind of grayish brown, really snuggly. I wanted a shawl that could also I would wear as a scarf. I mostly wear scarves. I don't really like wear shawls that wrap around my shoulders, but maybe it's because I'm new and someday I'll get more into wearing shawls. So yeah, it's knit sideways. So you start it at this point over here. It's a pretty cool construction. You start with just one stitch, and then it gets huge and huge and huge and huge. You start new patterns and new textures. Each segment is kind of like, I really like the start of each texture. And so then you reach a midway point, as you see here at this point, and then you turn around and everything else is mirrored. So now, as you can see, I'm well into the second half of the shawl. So yeah, that's one project. It's a pretty quick knit. I memorized, it's all charted, even though I memorized, okay, even though there are 7 charts, the textures that are within the charts are pretty intuitive, and I've memorized the pattern by now. Alright, so that's one work in progress. Second work in progress is a sweater. So these are the sleeves for the sweater. If you watched my silly trailer videos, like preview thing, it was a video of me sitting on my bed at home. I'm in my dorm room right now. Harvey Mudd is in California, and I was at my parents' house in Las Vegas, since I was on winter break, and I had nothing to do at home. I was sitting on my bed knitting on these sleeves actually, and then they were 2 at a time. Last night when I was working on this, I transferred one of the sleeves to just a holder, which is secretly just a short circular needle. So this is one of the sleeves, and it starts with ribbing, and I decided to kind of have a cabled motif that would kind of sprout from the ribbing, and then the rest is stockinette. There are some slight increases to make a tapered sleeve, but other than that, it's basically just stockinette all the way through. Here this is kind of like the sleeve's gotten long enough to reach the armpit, so I bound off a couple stitches, and now I'm working on raglan decreases. This pattern is a heavily modified version of a sweater pattern called Banff, Banff. So that was published in the Knitty magazine online. It's a free pattern, and I've made it once before, but it was with bulky yarn, which is what the pattern called for. A friend of mine wanted a sweater, and I didn't really want to knit a bulky weight sweater, so she and I negotiated, and we got we decided on a DK weight yarn. This is also creme brulee DK 100% superwash merino. It's the same yarn as my Chiral shawl, but this is what's the, I can't remember the colorway. Something with beige. Something with beige. I will have to do some sort of show notes. Right. Remind me about that if you're there. just pester me, please. Okay. So I think that's all I have to talk about for this. I already have the front and back pieces knit up, and I also blocked them. So they're just kind of sitting around waiting for me to finish these sleeves, and then after that, I will sew up the raglan edges and sew up the kind of the sides. So it goes shoulders, it goes shoulders, and then you go up the side seams and out the sleeves. And then after that, I will pick up stitches for the collar. My friend wanted a turtleneck, so I'm going to pick up a bunch of stitches, knit in more 2x2 ribbing until it's long enough to fold down. And if you're thinking I'm a super generous person, like, oh my god, she's willing to buy a sweater quantity of yarn to make for her friend, well, I let her pay for the yarn. So it's a great arrangement because I get to knit nice things for my friends get to be happy, I get to try new cool projects. It's a good setup. Yeah. Alright, so that's I don't like saying whip. I guess whip number 2. Alright, that's whip number 2. Third work in progress. Sorry for the clanging. I guess I should also talk about what needles I'm using. Both the Chiral and my, what should I call it? I'm calling it a lighter Banff sweater. Both the Chiral and my lighter Banff are on Chowgu needles. They're red lace tips. So it's a nice and pointy tip. I like it. It's stainless steel, and it makes my knitting nice and fast and smooth. And I've never really had a problem with stitches falling off. But that could just be me. I like slippery needles. The more slippery, the better. My most slippery needles, which are the Addy Turbos, I really like that texture. I was like, wow, I'm going so fast. Except the tips on the Addies are too dull for my taste. I like sharp tips, and they were just so rounded. I felt like I had to work so hard to catch the stitch. Anyway, so my third and final whip, I think, okay, if you're one of my friends and you know my workload and you're like, how is Chanel doing all of this? I don't know. I procrastinate so much. This is why you see I don't get a lot of sleep. Okay, so third whip is also going into the Andre Sunitz shawl along. Is a lace weight. Sorry. There. is a lace weight shawl. This yarn is, it's two separate yarns since I'm striping them, already showing up. But yeah, the lighting's not being too friendly, but I'm striping two yarns together, a dark purple and then dark purple and then a lighter purple, and the lighter purple has some it's not variation, heathering, yeah. And it looks like there's kind of a pinky purple with a bluey purple and a purple. Anyway, okay. So the pattern is Naked Gardening by, can't remember the author's name. I've got to put show notes. I will have show notes. All right. So yeah, it is an asymmetrical shawl. Start at the point with just a couple stitches. There's a garter body. The original pattern doesn't call for striping, but I decided to stripe it. This is also, so many firsts. Like I said, I like to take on challenges. So this is my first lace weight project. This is my first asymmetrical shawl. And this is my first time striping. So yeah, it's also, okay, I'm just gonna go grab the labels. They're right there. All right. So the lighter purple is Cascade Yarns Alpaca Lace. So it's 100% baby alpaca. It's super soft. Oh my god. Sorry, I'm weird. Sorry. All right. It's 437 yards to 50 grams, so it's a lot of yardage. And I'm glad that I'll have excess left over. The darker purple is Surrey Elegance, which is 100% Surrey alpaca, and the colorway is Purple Mountain Majesty. And it's a bigger skein. It's 100 grams and 875 yards. So this is going to be this also for my first time knitting with alpaca yarn. It's so soft. It's so soft. Alright, I'm going to stop weirding you out now. Alright, that's all I have with knitting in progress. I feel like I don't have any more recent finished objects that would be appropriate to bring up here. I guess I can go into what I'm wearing here. I'm wearing one of my first projects. This is the Barley hat by Tin Can Knits. So, if you've seen a barley hat before or made it yourself, you know that this is not correct. This panel here is supposed to be garter stitch. The rest of it's basically in stockinette stitch. And since I was such a beginner, I didn't read that you had to alternate between knitting and purling in the rounds. And I was just like, hey, I marked it off with the markers as I needed to. And then I'm like, I'm just going to purl all this because that's all I know how to do. I think it still turned out just fine. And it fits my head. I'm going to keep it on because you saw I had some stupid bedhead. I have bad hair days. The funny thing is, because I was such a beginner when I was knitting it, all of my purl stitches are actually twisted. You can see here, and you can also see in this kind of reverse stockinette section I had, all of the purl stitches are twisted. They're kind of tight, but it still fits great. It has a nice slouch. I guess I just got really lucky with the fit. So yeah, that is knitting. That's a historical FO. That's iced coffee. I'm a caffeine addict. I'm so addicted to caffeine. All right, So that's all I had for knitting. So now this is moving into just the video blog portion of this podcast. I um so my main plan right now for um my gap year is to be working in education and public service. And I think I've said that before. And so I was applying for a fellowship called the Napier Fellowship offered by a local organization. Actually, the organization is called the Pilgrim Place, and they're a retirement community. They're a super cool place of retired activists, pastors, like social workers, and they what they wanted to do was they after they had retired, they didn't want to just tune out of society. They wanted to stay involved with their community, stay involved with issues that affects people all around them. And so two people that lived at the Pilgrim Place, their last names were Napier, they started a foundation, and one of the things that they offered was a fellowship which would provide a grant for a couple of students here in Claremont, where Harvey Mudd is, to carry out a service project. And I submitted my service project, which was I wanted to start service a service oriented mentoring program at my old high school in Las Vegas to target struggling kids and um, boost their confidence in themselves, draw out their natural talents, and connect them with the great resource that mentors can be and bring out their leadership skills. So I applied for the fellowship with a proposal for that program, and last week I got rejected from the fellowship. So that was pretty hard. I'm gonna try not to I'm gonna try not to make the video blog portion just too depressing. I hope I hope there will be one big acceptance somewhere in these next few months, so it's not all I got rejected from this. I'm gonna cry now. If if I ever start crying on one of these videos, I'm just gonna stop recording, okay? And let's not even get to dating. I'm not going to talk about dating on this. That is not something I am going to record. I don't care where I end up relationship wise in my life. I don't want to know about the mistakes I made when I was 20. I'm sure I will remember them. Okay. So life. So that was a big snag. I am after processing. I think I'm mostly done processing the grief of getting rejected, and I'm feeling up to looking into backups to get funding for my project because I want to make this mentoring program happen. So one possibility is I could apply to AmeriCorps, and have they have a lot of core members in Las Vegas. I When I visited my high school over winter break, I keep talking about winter break, so it was a pretty productive winter break, I guess. Um, I visited my high school during winter break, and my high school recently or within the past few years after I graduated, started a Family Engagement Resource Center, or FERC, as I'm going to call it for short, and everyone else does too. Is is a resource center that has computer labs for students who don't have internet access at home. They have scholarship workshops, all sorts of different college readiness, graduation readiness workshops. I think it's a great center. It's very new, and it's staffed with two coordinators who are AmeriCorps members. And so I'm looking into the program, seeing if I could maybe also be a coordinator for FERC. So that's one plan. I need to hit up some local organizations and see if they're willing to give funding for the program. Anyway, so that's that. Right now, I'm just trying to pass all my classes in my last semester and hopefully graduate. So I'm taking I'm taking 3 courses, none of which are physics, none of which are in my major, but I need them to graduate anyways because I messed up with my elective credits. So I'm taking crafts and technology. It's an art history class, which is super cool. Our first week we covered fiber crafts, and I was just totally geeking out the entire time. Um, we covered, well, first we had to cover the string revolution, which, if you think about it, like having string or something long that was sturdy can be manipulated like yarn, or I'm just even looking at like the cord of my headphones. Then you can tie things together. You could make axes, tying arrows to the shafts. And our professor, she is visiting from Chicago. She actually brought in these. She brought in these huge like alpaca. What was it? I don't know, but did she call it yarn? They were huge. And they were like this thick, and she said it was core spun, so it was alpaca fiber spun around a cotton central cord, and if you pulled it off, it was basically just loose fiber. I don't know if it was roving. I don't know too much about fiber, yet. It's one of my goals. And so she actually just gave us lengths of this alpaca fiber to play with while she was lecturing. And I actually ended up, I was one of the first people to figure out like spinning it, and you could take the fiber, pull it into a thinner strip and twist. I know kind of the basics of how to spin on a drop spindle. I need to practice more, but yeah. So and then a few more people figured it out over the course of the lecture, and so we were just spinning with and playing with things in our hands. I really like that. I hope it would be cool to maybe just like bring my knitting to her lectures, since it actually does help me pay attention if I'm not knitting on a super complex pattern. So yeah, spun it up. I was just spinning it up, and then I got a long single. I was actually using like a pen for a spindle because I didn't have anything else. It worked just fine. And then it was sitting in my backpack for a couple more days. And I guess that's at the twist. And then I took it off the pen and then plied it into this cool, very squishy, very soft 2-ply yarn. It's very inconsistent in the thickness. Here it's really thin. It gets really thick here, and then some parts are more twisted. Yeah, that's crafts and technology. We are going over metalworking and glass blowing this week. It's cool. And then eventually we're going over like the history of different crafts, and then eventually we're going to go into how these crafts have evolved to how in modern day society, like what place do they have when we can mechanize all these processes? What place do handicrafts have? Which is something I'd really like to answer with my knitting. Okay, art history, and then I'm taking women in music, which is a music history course that's also cool. And I shouldn't talk about all my classes at length. I will bring them up in later videos. And then the third class I'm taking is a literature class on Shakespeare. And we're reading Shakespeare plays, and then actually we're reading 5 of them. And then halfway through the course, we'll actually choose one of the plays to produce and perform. So that's going to be fun. I actually took it last year, and we chose the 12th night, and I was Festi, the fool. And apparently people liked me. We set our production in the 60s. So we had, for scene transitions, we had a bunch of not videos, we had a bunch of 60s music playing. Like, we had a couple of Beatles songs. We had, I tried to incorporate some Motown. So we had Martha and the Vandellas with Dancing in the Streets. We had a Patsy Cline song. We had, it was late 60s, early 70s, so I also put a Cream song in there. If you know how to play, I was really proud of this. I was really proud of this song selection. If you know in the play Malvolio, the kind of very hoity-toity butler dude who needs to be put in his place, as Shakespeare likes to do with characters that challenge their their status in society. Um, he at one point gets locked up and kind of tortured by a bunch of the characters. And it can be a comedic scene. I know it doesn't sound very comedic. I was also iffy about it. It was like, oh, this guy's being bullied. Yeah. But we managed to make it ridiculous enough so that it the audience was laughing. Anyway, so he's locked up and he's complaining about all the darkness in this like, little closet that they've locked him up in. We actually took a table, draped black cloth over it, so it was like and then Festi was the main tormentor, and I would like jump onto the table and like rattle it. It was really fun. Anyway, so the scene transition before that scene, he complains about the blackness, and then I chose Cream's The White Room, and I was really proud of that. As far as a lot of people go, I don't consume a lot of media. As in, I'm not addicted to any TV shows, really. I don't binge on, like, Netflix or anything. So I apparently reached the maximum recording time on my phone, and now it's giving me an 18-minute time limit because I guess I'm going to hit the memory limit on my phone. Wow, I talked for longer than I thought I could. My mouth is a little dry. Not that coffee is really great for hydrating, but it's still liquid. So, media. On my radar, I like listening to podcasts like Welcome to Night Vale. And then knitting podcasts are Andre C. Knits, Sockmatician by Nathan Taylor, The Knitting Expat by Mina Phillip. And non-knitting podcasts, I've been listening to a podcast called Just a Story. And it's a podcast, it's very American-centric, but it talks about and deconstructs and analyzes urban legends that we tell. And they kind of take two approaches with their analyses. One is historical analysis, like what news items that were going around at the time when this urban legend popped up that could have inspired this. And then the second one, which I enjoy a lot more, is when they analyze the story from a point of folklore, literature, and just kind of picking apart and seeing what threads, the very, very old threads in that story are that highlight like maybe fundamental human fears, something that's stuck around in their society for a long time. And I'm going to use an example from their first episode, which was they were talking about the urban legend where a guy goes out partying, and so maybe he's in Vegas or maybe he's in New Orleans or something. He goes out partying. It's a big, huge deal. Maybe he was at a bachelor party, and so he meets these two chicks at a bar, and he's talking to them all night. Maybe he's with a friend. The friend has a girlfriend, so the friend goes away and's like, "Hey, dude, have fun. Go for it." And so the guy follows the two girls back to their hotel room, and from there he doesn't remember anything. And then in the morning he wakes up and he's lying in a bathtub full of ice. And then there's a phone next to him with a note saying, "Call 911 if you want to live." He calls 911, and it turns out he's had one of his kidneys stolen for organ trafficking. So they go into this. You should just listen to the podcast. I'm not going to tell everything that's in it. But they go into some news items that are popular, that were really like hyped up in, was it the 70s or 80s? And people were really paranoid about organ trafficking, and it was a big deal. But then when they analyze it from a folklore fairy tale perspective, that's when my mind was blown. So it's basically a morality play. This guy, he's young, 20-something, attractive. He's talking to two girls at a bar, and they're like all over him. He's attractive. He's kind of like a classical hero figure. Um, and he gets tempted by sin. Two girls, two women who are also probably very attractive. He gets tempted by lust and these femme fatales, and he fails. He falls from grace, and he is punished for his sin. So I think that's a really cool way to look at that story. And it's we have so many stories, so many very, very old stories about sexual like misconduct and giving in to your kind of base desires, that it's cool that you we have this story that's the same themes but wrapped up in a modern setting. And the reason I mentioned that it was in Las Vegas or New Orleans is that it's also like these cities are seen as, places of bad decisions, as the podcast puts it. And there are also places, I mean, Vegas is literally referred to as Sin City, my hometown. Yay. It's a great thing to be known for, right? So yeah, they're like dens of sin, and he has entered and he has failed his trial. Anyway, so that's cool. That's one podcast I've been listening to, Just a Story. It's on iTunes. Check it out. So that's all I have this time. I might try to, I think once a week would be too often for me for these videos, but I'll try again, say like 2 weeks, and I'll see you then. Thanks for listening, and I suppose I'll call this the Pipernell podcast, because Pipernell is my Facebook page for my knitting. Alright, so thanks again for listening. Happy knitting. Hope you have a good day, if you do knit. Yeah, have a good day. May it be peaceful and full of laughter. Bye.